Hey there. Welcome to Her Truth Revealed, Unraveling Our Midlife Era. I'm your host, Wonderful Morrison. This space is for the woman who's done pretending, done hiding, and ready to step fully into her truth. Midlife isn't about fading into the background. It's a time where resilience lights the way and authenticity becomes the loudest voice in the room. In this season of our lives, we are more than just survivors. We are creators, revolutionaries, and unapologetic women rewriting the rules. I've been through my battles, rebuilding from loss, betrayal, and heartache. But here's the truth. Every challenge, every tear, and every setback has led me to this moment of profound transformation. Together, we're going to dive into raw, real conversations that shatter stereotypes, tackle the tough stuff, and embrace the powerful magic that is midlife. So, if you're ready to live this chapter with boldness and joy, hit subscribe. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear it and leave a review so we can keep this revolution going. Ladies, no more masks, no more apologies, just the truth of who we are. Let's do this. Hello and welcome to another episode of Her Truth Revealed, Unraveling Our Midlife Era, where I have amazing conversations and dialogue with amazing human beings. And I'm not just saying that to say that. I'm saying it because really there's 8 billion people on Earth. Okay, this is like my 50th episode or something like that. So there's 50 awesome humans out there that I've had conversations with. And what makes them amazing is their journey to unraveling their own truth and why they now serve the world in such a great capacity for change and healing, transition and transformation. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my guest today, Jackie, who is a consultant for mainly women, right? Mainly women on their inspired journey to unraveling their truth. But first, let's hear about you and who you are, Jackie. Welcome to the show.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you. So I am a Bostonian, about almost 20 years in, so this is home. I am a wife, a loving partner, a bonus mom. I work as a relationship mindset coach, so I empower ambitious women of color and allies to break free from hustle culture, reclaim their time freedom, and become the main character of their story instead of an extra.
I love that. And you know what's so fascinating about that is there's this language out there about big energy, right? About main character energy and how there's this real fine line, I think, especially in this midlife where we're trying to figure out, do we still want big energy, because when I think of big energy, I think, oh gosh, here we go. It's a new word for hustle. It's a new word for hustle, right? It's the same thing, but sounds different. So, can you help us understand the difference between what you're talking about of like getting us out of this hustle culture? Is it a generational thing? Is it a self-motivating thing? And especially when it comes to us women, what's the difference there?
Sure. Well, I would say that the majority of the people that I work with are Gen Xers. And what we have seen was we were taught the hustle for sure, kind of nose to the grindstone mentality. So when I think about not hustling, it's not about not being productive. It's not about not following your dreams. It's about the mentality and what it takes to get there. And as we shift and we look at the energy, I love how you said there's talk around big energy and main character energy. And it's so interesting because sometimes I feel really behind. I didn't know that. When I think about it, I think about how we as women get into these roles in our life. and
Yeah.
we are successful in our careers or in our businesses. We have found the person, and that's so great. But things are just kind of going and going and going and going. And unconsciously, we start to shrink ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that because we think that it makes us better to the people around us.
Interesting.
And so it can happen so subtly and without the encouragement of others. It's not about healthy or unhealthy relationships, although we can always continue to look at them being healthier. It oftentimes has to do with the stories we're telling ourselves.
Ooh, ooh, she's digging. Jackie is digging. You're excavating us right now at this moment because I feel like all of the things you said up to then is okay. I can relate to that. I can, but then again, like all things, right? It comes back to you. So then we have to, I love how you're sort of differentiating this idea of hustle culture or hustle energy versus this big energy main character, because it's a difference between selfless and selfish, right? And self care and self performance sort of thing. So I love how you're differentiating that because I think there's a really a lot of muddy waters when it comes to coaching, right? When it comes to how do you choose? Like here we are on social media. My phone tells me every week how many hours I've been on it. And I'm sure of the 8 billion people, let's just even guesstimate that. Of the 8 billion people on earth, 6 billion people are actively on social media. How does one person kind of like swim through this foggy lake of desperation and need to not feel so hustled and not feel like they are in the hustle culture to pick the right coach or to pick the right direction or to pick the right guide? And that's sort of like what I would love to hear why you call it the inspired journey, because you know, there's a lot. I mean, back in the day, they used to call it the buzzword, right? That was the business terminology to sort of how you can find somebody in the Red Sea. Is they're using all the buzzwords. Let's see what they're all about. Inspiration, empowerment, confidence. Those are all sort of part of this coaching buzzword. How do they find you, and how do we know that you're the right fit as you're explaining to us about why this hustle culture has become a part of us? Because it's our stories, people. It's our stories.
Well, first of all, I want to address the commentary on the different types of selves that you mentioned. And I think we shrink from the idea of selfish because we've learned what that looks like. That's Scrooge McDuck, right?
Yeah.
That's the mentality. Or even self care Sundays, or my wine is my self care, my pedicure, where really it's actually self love.
A bomb.
Yeah. The ways that you take care of you on your inner journey, that's really loving yourself. So there's different layers to that. As we look to navigate the waters of social media and finding your right guide, if I had a magic wand, it'd be a lot easier. But what I can say is, I think you can clearly train your algorithm. I know that for me, social media has been uplifting because I choose what I look at and I look for inspiration. And so my feed is inspiring. It's this matter of choice. And sometimes we are running on choices that aren't serving us because it's the ones we're just really used to, or the ones that everyone's talking about, the ones that our friends tell us about. We want to be caught up, or maybe we're just trying to zone out, but it doesn't allow us to truly connect. True connection is meaningful. So when you're looking for the person that's going to bring you guidance, my number one thought is you have to like them.
There's a clue.
Yeah, you have to like them. You have to be able to be seen. Sometimes that's hit or miss. One thing I think is really interesting about the coaching business that I didn't fully understand before I got deeper into it was that you can take a discovery session. It's great to do that. And for those who might not be as familiar, that's a free session. Oftentimes, because of the used car salesman mentality or talking to the person in retail, and we get this stigma around, well, I'm not sure I want to buy, and we tense up and we get all survival mode-esque. But the point is, it's more like shopping. It's more like trying something on and seeing if it fits. So take a call, take that chance, have a conversation and see, is this going to work for me or not? We have the freedom to do that. And I think that is one of the best ways. Because oftentimes you see people and they might not translate in the same way. They're either quite performative or the opposite. Maybe they're just not good on camera and it's worlds of awkward, but they've been told they need to show up. But when you talk to them, you're like, oh, wow, this is a completely different experience. For me, it's so much about tapping into your intuition and understanding what's going to suit you, what your style is, how you want to stretch yourself while still having a bit of comfort, because we need that. We need to have a level of comfort when we're going into a trusted situation.
I love what you said about intuition and that comfort of being in the space of trust, right? Because as a client, let's say if I'm the one suffering looking for a remedy, I intuitively need to understand that I am looking for somebody to trust. And maybe that's also part of the, here's another new language I've learned. Well, it's not terribly new. However, I didn't know that it was titled under this, but the sister wound, right? So, sister wound is what I've been told, and what I know of it is our experience of being betrayed by other women through whether it's competition or comparison or envy, all the ways that sort of have been part of the general knowledge of why, housewives work really well online, or reality TV has been the biggest rated television in forever, is pitting us against each other type of thing. And I think when we are out looking for a solution or a way to alleviate the suffering, and like for instance, do you know how many women I speak to? I'm a strategist advisor for businesses, for women owned businesses, and 99.9% of women tell me their big dream is to public speak, is to speak on some stage, right? And then at first, that's usually the first thing. And I'm like, that is fantastic. And as I get to know them, I'm thinking, why aren't you already speaking? Right? Your wealth of knowledge is incredible. And how you got to this incredible wealth of knowledge is another amazing story to be told. But why aren't we doing it? And I think when I ask that question, there's the language that I get back is, well, my story isn't that interesting. Or, I don't know, is it any good? I bet you other people have the same story. So they sort of dismiss or negate the power of themselves. And as I dig deeper, I realized, like myself, it really comes from sister wounds. So we have an assumption, ladies, that the world is barraging us with women aren't awesome, women suck, and all of these, right? Women have been oppressed. Yes, I'm not saying we're not, but our sister wounds, I think what keeps us even more underneath that drowning water. So, yes, so I guess what I'm trying to understand is you work with women who want to, I mean, it's on your title right behind you, speaker, right? How do you support women in today's world as midlifers, Gen Xers, who have incredible stories to be told, to get kind of past that wound that we didn't even realize is there? I didn't know that so much of my inability to be showing up comes from being judged by my sisters. It's terrible, but this is what we suffer with.
Well, thank you for teaching me the term sister wound. And boy, did that resonate and bring up so many stories. I mean, countless stories, which is upsetting and true. And what it makes me think of is how we say women aren't actually dressing for men, they're dressing for other women.
Yeah.
In what I do in my role, so to clarify, I don't coach them on speaking. I myself am a speaker. However, we do have this because what tends to happen is that women say, I'm sure my issue isn't as bad as someone else's. I don't know why I'm complaining. I don't mean to complain. I'm good. I'm good. Even when they're coming and asking for help, even when they're in a session, they're still trying to minimize themselves.
Yes.
Right? And that comparison comes in the way of saying that they're unworthy of even asking for help. What I find is being able to allow the space, the safety, the elevation. I'm celebrating with them, right? We celebrate progress, showing up, trying, doing it, wanting to create change, and then taking the steps. Not everyone is going to go from 0 to 100, but we have to keep celebrating and honoring the individuality of the journey. So that's one aspect, is really appreciating who each person is for how they show up in this world. And knowing that whatever they're doing, however they're being, isn't wrong. It's not right or wrong. It just is. And is it serving them? And is it how they want their future to look?
Good questions.
Yeah. And how to create something different. And then another aspect, I would say, in a way that unconsciously heals the sister wound that now I'm just learning about and using a million times over, is a virtual networking that I run called the She Suite Connector. And in this space, it is a safe space that I've created. It's invitation and referral only because it has to be a safe space. And I bring in badass women of color and allies. And they have the chance to connect in an intimate way, in a meaningful way, be heard, and learn from others and their stories. And they're received in a way that they're not minimized and they're not comparing.
I mean, first of all, I commend you for being the catalyst in that space. And then on top of that, women of color in that space. Because women, just in general, don't feel safe a lot. And we probably feel unsafe more than we admit. And then women of color just have it. There's an added level of threat to how we exist in the world. And I love that. So now tell us how you got there. What is your journey of brought you from the badassness of Jackie in 1999 to the badass Jackie now in 2025? Like, what got you to think that, you know what, I am made for this thing called coaching? And I want to preface that because it takes us, it's like being a nurse, like being a doctor. I'm not saying it that you don't have to be a qualified person to be a doctor, but to be a nurse, you have to be born with that level of compassion and that level of desire to be there on a very multiple dimensional version of yourself for one human for 8 straight hours and that one human is like replicated in other people. And coaching, I think, is the same way. I think it's a job of this nurse who were just born with it, which I've learned some people should not go for it, right? Some people should really just be in other arenas of coaching. You are, the first conversation I had with you, I'm like, first of all, how often you smile at me when you're talking to me makes me feel so good. I'm like, oh my gosh, she really hears me because she's smiling at me. What got you here? What was the journey for you?
It was honestly a journey of too much abuse, a lot of healing, a career that was a 20-year career that was very likely a trauma response.
Interesting. Take us a little deeper into that.
Sure. I was in sales. I was in sales and marketing in the travel and hospitality industry. Why it was a trauma response was my role in my family was the peacekeeper. I was there to make everyone happy and everyone comfortable. I was also raised with conditional love.
Ouch.
So what is more conditional than salespeople knowing you're only as good as your last sale? Than having to put your personal needs aside, even when a client puts his hand on your butt, keeps it there, and you can't do anything about it unless you want to lose the account, hand it to someone else after all the hard work you've done. All of that showed me, I ended up in this space for a reason, and yet it's not the reason that I want to choose moving forward. So I am grateful because I started my healing journey 23 some odd years ago. Not after my first abuser, but after the first conscious one.
Interesting.
Learning what domestic violence was about. My college boyfriend was verbally, emotionally, mentally abusive, stalked me after we broke up, had to get a restraining order. And after going through the courts and kind of that adrenaline survival of it, getting my fierce on, right? A few months later, I thought, well, I kind of want to start dating, but now I'm scared.
Yeah.
I don't ever want this to happen again. And I was living in Colorado. I went to Safe House Denver. I had a counselor, Tamika, that helped me, that I'm so grateful for to this day. And she taught me what boundaries were. Because this was before social media, and I think chat rooms were starting, which I didn't go into because I didn't understand them. And I had never in my life heard the term boundaries. That wasn't taught in Latinx
I
home.
hear you.
So I learned that, and I started to create change in my life.
Wow. And then what was that moment where you were like, I heard this saying a couple weeks ago that we need to help others from our scars, not our wounds. So when was that moment for you when you realized, like, you know what? I'm good. I'm healthy now. I'm in a good place. What now? And then you chose coaching as the vehicle in which to help others heal their wounds and turn them into scars. What was that moment for you?
So the irony is, when I started my business, I have not changed the name of my business. It's always been Inspired Journey Consulting, but it started as something completely different, doing sales and marketing in wellness travel. But
Interesting.
It came from a place of wanting to support people in their mental wellness, understanding what I'd been through. And so it really was around this inspired journey. I would say there was a point where I realized I care more about the employee than the revenue. And it was through podcasting, actually, as a guest and speaking, trial and error where I realized what I was ready to speak about, which showed me how healed I was, versus what I wasn't, which showed me I was still in the depth of it. So that was a bit of a learning curve in that space. And then I had people coming to me saying, you're a light and I want to be like you, and I want to be calm like you are, and I want to be positive like you are. And is that real? Like, yeah, it just kind of is. Having phone calls that were supposed to be about a hotel or a destination turn into something much deeper. And seeing this is the shift. This is where I need to be.
Wow. I can see it unfold as you're telling the story, right? Because I think so many who are actually living out their calling have a very similar story. It wasn't what they were going into. They had a different idea, but that environment was that divine intervention of the perfect time and the perfect gifts combined together. Then one day they just, okay, well, what else can I do with this, right? How else can this can I explore my genius and offer it out into the world? And I feel like that really needs to have more clarity in the world of coaching, because I think there are some that are built for coaching, and then there are some that should be mentors. And then there are some that are guides, and then there are some that are counselors. And there's some, like what I learned about myself is I'm a much better like teacher than I am a coach. So it shifted the way most people assume or would say or introduce me as a business coach. And I really have to take a step back and say, actually, not, because coaching has its own definition and I don't really fit that definition. Right. So I think there needs to be a lot of clarity around that. And thank you for sharing that with us, that's how you got there, is really, truly, you were already doing it just in an arena that didn't sound like coaching. And coaching has probably been a part of your process for as long as you, even in sales. I mean, sales is coaching though.
It absolutely is. It's interesting that you say that, because what I started to think about were these moments throughout the years that whenever I would overcome something, somebody would come in my life that was going through it, and I would be able to support them through it. It was oftentimes not someone I was initially close to. And so it provided that space. And I think one of the things that became really important on this journey that probably aligns really nicely with coaching is when I experienced depression, how people spoke to me became really important. The questions that I was asked that made me uncomfortable, that I couldn't answer, versus a simple statement or how a question was phrased. It made me speak to others differently because I didn't want to be spoken to that way. So even seeing through that lens has really helped to shape this. I think one thing, and I'll tell you, when it comes to definitions of roles, there may be some blurred lines in working with me, and I'll be very blatant about that. Because of my history with trauma, I am not a trauma specialist. It's just trauma experienced.
I love that differentiating sort of, I don't want to say title, but how you just said it. You're not a trauma specialist, you're an experienced, that brilliant.
Well, thank you. I would say because of that, oftentimes my clients have likely been through some things. Clearly, oppression is abuse, right? So as I'm working with women of color and women who experience the patriarchy, we've all been through it. So that comes with its own layer.
Yeah.
But because of that, I navigate things differently than other coaches that I know. And maybe it's similar to what you were saying. This coach should probably be a mentor or a guide, or who knows, right? because I've been asked, what do you do when they want to start talking about these things? And it's just this line of therapy and coaching. And for me, because of trauma, I allow that space.
Yeah.
We're going to move forward, but they need to have a space to tell things differently
Yes.
because they've been
Yes.
silenced for too long.
And I want to take it one layer deeper on that, because that is a common trend of, we've been silenced, we don't have a voice, which is we're not speaking it in a generalized way as women. We're speaking it in terms of, like you said, experience, right? And maybe each of us has a different story. But I really kind of want to veer into your specialty of women of color, because I think there's always an added element that is unspoken amongst us, that is goes a little bit deeper of a layer, and it's a little bit more hard fought in, and not just in, like, I live in the US, you live in the US. It's not just this territorial continental thing. I think there's just many layers of it from all of us generationally. And also I think it's a painted picture of how, every generation is sort of being molded into, so it gets extreme. I noticed that there's this trend, like it's super extreme, right? When women didn't have the right to vote, it was a very extreme time of women walking away from things that were only meant for them, like motherhood, wifehood, silencehood, right? All the spaces where women were portrayed as a thing, and then there were just groups of women that were fighting against that. To be able to just vote, put a piece of on a piece of paper a name that they chose, like that is an interesting phenomenon. And then it just gets, right, then we get the movement of sexuality, RGB, who the woman just passed away. She, when she was in law school, it was literally women couldn't have credit cards, we couldn't buy things with our own name, we had to get the permission of our fathers or our husbands. Chanel, one of the most well-known brands in the history of fashion, made it where women were arrested for wearing pants, because at the time women were not allowed by law to wear pants. So let's talk a little bit about why you chose women of color, and not just because you are one, but why focus on that?
Because of my complicated history with being one.
Mm. Yes.
So I was raised very whitewashed. My dad's Latino, my mom is white. And while I knew, all my nationalities, the religions, we eat pasteles and rice and beans and all of those things, I was still taught very much to be white. And I didn't realize that. And so for me, I actually spent years denying my own cultural background because I didn't feel it. I was told very differently. And also, I'd been shamed for not being Latina enough.
I know that.
But then on the flip side, never really feeling like I belonged.
I feel that too.
And it's so complicated, and trying to find the place that feels safe for you, but yet you're still navigating, trying to make everybody else comfortable. It's extremely painful. And if I can lessen any of that, I really want to help. When I met my husband, he's the most wonderful man in the world who happens to be Black. And he is the one that told me, Jackie, you're not white. Literally, I was 31 years old. What are you talking about? Are you serious? Shocked me. It changed my world and set me down a path of understanding what diversity, equity, and inclusion even means. These were not things that were part of my life. And I'm hungry for knowledge, and I'm hungry for healing, and
Love it.
to make a happier, more respectful place, right? I was anti-abuse from the abuse experiences I've had. Like I said, oppression is abuse. So seeing all of that really helped to shift things. And the more that I learned and educated myself, I don't just educate on being a Latina. That was one of the last things I did because it was so painful for me. I educated myself on Black history, on, for a Black man versus a Black woman, for the LGBTQ community, specifically for the trans community, because that's quite different, for many, many different perspectives, Asian mental health. I wanted to know and learn, and I still do, because I care. And I want to be able to see and understand differently. And this was before I got into coaching. It was just me wanting to know and be better. And I feel like creating a space for women of color, they deserve to be seen for how unique they are and how complicated their worlds are, and how sometimes they just want to show up and be awesome and not worry about any of that.
Amen. I hear it all, and I'm celebrating it all. And I'm not saying it as a woo woo, like forget everybody else. It's about being a part of the crew, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not just a minimize. If I'm going to be sort of singled out, it should be because of whatever I bring to the table as my brilliance, not because of gender or color or anything like that. It should, right? That's how the way I see the world is like we're getting singled out not at all for being a woman, not at all for being a woman of color, not at all, but really because I studied this one thing for 10,000 hours and it makes me so brilliant at it. That's how I'm going to get singled out. And I say that with a little bit of laughter because I think what I love what you're saying is that I wrote it down when you said the complicated history of being one. That needs to be on a shirt because that's the only way you can explain it. There's no other explanation. It can't be because like you started off naming off all the things that go with that particular heritage, right? Food, culture, music, clothing, the whole thing. That's just about preserving the very thing that has calls it history, but that's not the complication of being of that, coming from that ancestral line or being that in the modern world today. And I think that's really the uniqueness of it. And I love your answer above all other answers I've ever heard when it comes to why did you pick that particular focus? Why there? And I think the complication of being me, the complication, complicated history being you, all of that matters. And then on top of that, the abuse. So I kind of want to bring it back full circle because one of the stories that I come from, one of my stories is I come from a family and a culture and a era where beating your child was not it was a thing. It was part of the culture, and it's interesting because there's so many comedians out there that talk about that and make fun of it. And yes, we all can laugh because we can relate. It's interesting how much of the crowd is laughing with you because they can relate. However, growing up, when the one time I had shared that story, it was like, what? Your dad hits you? And I was like, wait, your dad does it? Like, what do you mean? This is just a thing. And it made me feel more outed, like out of the circle, because the response was so dramatic. Like, what do you mean? Not the, oh yeah, me too the other day. Or like, it happened to me once, right? My dad got really mad. No, it was a blatant like, you should call somebody about, I'm 10. What are you saying that I should, right? So then when you're talking about this trauma experience of being Latina and having abusive relationships, talk about the extra added element of why being a coach for women of color is even more important because there's that piece.
Yeah. Silence protects the violence. And that makes it really important for me to be a voice that doesn't stand for that, that shows others that there's room for them to grow and heal and to change their story from what they were told it was, what trauma or abuse made it to be, shaped it to be. We hear the term representation matters. And I spent 15 consecutive years in therapy. I've hired multiple coaches throughout the year. None of my therapists look like me or my clients. And most of my coaches didn't either. We need to be the example of what we want this world to look like. We have a deep history and ancestral trauma of things being our fault, of us being wrong, feeling shame, and us trying to contort ourselves to make other people comfortable, which often comes with abuse as well. Right? So there's this synergy in it, these commonalities that I feel very deeply. And it happens so subtly. We were talking about shrinking, coming back, happens so subtly in ways you didn't even realize, and just deserve more than that.
Yeah. Agreed. And I agree so fully in that subtleness, that sneaky subtleness of our stories that you started off with, right? The stories that we tell. So when I realized that, gosh, no one else really gets the beat down from their father during their upbringing like I did. One of the stories I told myself, well, I must be way below there, like, right, in a comparative. It wasn't as if when you're 12 you're not setting yourself up to compare yourself, right? You're just trying to get along with everyone. It's just, you're just seeing what the world is about and you in it. But that was one of the very first markers of, oh, I am not like anybody else, of like, oh yeah, I need to be very careful who I share these things with, protect myself, because there's a one thing I can't control is how often my dad will lose his mind and do the things that he does, or how I present myself to the world. So that first wall really starts shaping itself just from the difference of households. And now, if I'd grown up in a different space, that would have been more common to have that shared experience with other 12-year-olds of like, oh yeah, I brought home a C, so I got kind of a little beat down. So I didn't get that experience because that wasn't the environment I was in. And not to say it was any better if anybody understood it, but it was the first marker of my wall as a woman of color in an arena where the majority of my mirror peers did not look like me, did not come from any, and that. So it's interesting how I have said to myself, or how I have introduced many times, I'm a recovering Catholic, right? But when I look back, that was a space growing up where we were very similar to each other. And it felt good. It felt safe to be in that environment because we've had very shared experiences of the things. And so I guess I'm putting together all of what you're saying is why women of color have an even bigger responsibility to show up and to do their own work of healing so that we can also be a mirror image of those looking for healing too. Because you're right, years and years of therapy, of counseling, of coaching, very far and few between of that unspoken sort of energy where it matches your energy, right? In that space. So thank you for being that. I'm going to ask my last question that I ask all my guests on here. So you're walking down the street and you walk into a coffee shop and you see 25-year-old Jackie. What do you say to 25-year-old Jackie that she'd actually listen to them? What would that be?
I would say, girl, when you come across those women or those places and spaces and you think to yourself, wow, I wish I could do that. I wish I could be like that. That's actually your clue that that's where you're headed.
Wow, that's such a good one. That is such a good one. I really like that. It's very solid in terms of, you know, what a 25-year-old would hear and be like, what do you think on that?
You know, you brought me back, and it's something I reflected on the other day. Do you have a minute for me to share?
Absolutely.
When I was 25 years old, I moved across the country, left my first love, left a relationship, a home I owned, and I started over in Boston. And the year leading up to it, I had met all of these women who were telling me stories about how they've lived in different places. They traveled for business. They moved to different cities with their jobs. They started over in new places where they didn't know anybody. And I felt so drawn to that. And I said exactly that. I wish I could be like them. And as I look back, all the times where I said, I wish I could do this, I wish I had this, it's the life that I've created today.
Wow. Wow. What a beautiful reflection and a beautiful true story to, because I think also when we as women have conversations with each other and you say, oh, I wish somebody in the crowd somewhere will be like, that's negative talk. Don't talk like that. And it's like, I don't know. I'm just saying my truth. How are you to tell me what is a negative language, right? And sometimes when we say things and the person who's listening deeply cares about us and they say, hey, I would take a step back on that type of language, I'd actually hear it. But an unsolicited whim of language just because I said the word I wish, right, it has been an interesting dynamic of how, again, getting around humans who are like super coaches and things like that, it's a thing.
Man, wishing is part of dreaming and exciting. I'm not saying I wish my thighs looked like hers, right? I'm not beating myself down. I'm looking at possibility. And that's one of the things that sometimes we just have to notice the clues. Why can't we have it? Why can't we do this?
Right.
Maybe there is something ahead. Sometimes, especially when we get to this point in time in our lives, we tend to think that possibility is gone. Like, nope, we've made the life. We're in it now forever. Like, this is not that life. We get to make it.
Yeah. There was a guy in the movies that would always say, I'm pretty sure it was MTV, he would always say, shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll be among the stars. I used to love that because I thought, oh, yeah, that is such a way to see the world where you could shoot for the biggest thing out there, but along the way, it might not even been the moon that you were aiming for, right? It was just the trajectory at the time because that was the biggest visual thing that you can see. And I thought, I really loved it, but I didn't really know what was behind it other than the language that it said. But as I have matured and now being in my truth, yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's it right there. Because it's what you just explained is you, every time you said it, you set out to create it. And here you are living it, right? So I just want to take the time to say thank you. Thank you to this woman who is been such a light in our conversation because Jackie is a woman who what is in her bio says dismantles self-doubt. And I always like to, I used to do the bio in the beginning just to get everybody set up. But I don't know. I think when we get to know you and then we learn what you do, it makes it more cohesive of like, oh yeah, that is her. Because What you are titled under is a relationship mindset coach, and your goal is to empower ambitious women of color, and you ally with us to break free from the hustle culture. And how she does that is to help us reclaim time freedom, which we don't even know we don't have, first of all, and write our next chapter, which I think so many, like my own mother, I think she left that chapter blank. I think she was so petrified to write anything down because the comfort of being a professional woman of color in the 70s and 80s, that was the pinnacle of pinnacles, right? From especially a woman who comes from a different country that just didn't come here as a child, wasn't born here, came as an adult, the whole thing. And so I'm really grateful that Jackie also is a podcast host herself called Through Inspired Eyes. Is that what it's called? Inspired Eyes. And she chairs a Global Wellness Institute Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Initiative. It's a mouthful, but it's worth saying. She stands firm in her belief that chocolate and peanut butter are the best dessert combination. 100% agree on that. And lastly, Jackie's vision is to create a world where people who have been silenced for far too long reclaim the power of their voice. She sees a safe space with proper representation, again, equity, vulnerability, and endless possibilities, because Jackie aims to give you back those stolen dreams. So I just read you her bio in my own way after you've met her now for the last hour. Now it's up to you to put those together and decide whether she's the person to talk to or not, or go to her podcast and listen to more of what she has to say, or join the community she has built to keep us in a safe space. And I just want to say thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you for the energy that you bring, the big energy, the main character energy. Thank you for being my friend, and thank you for being the person who stepped into who she was called to be, and then to get on the path and fought the dragons to get here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm honored, truly. Took my breath away.
Yay. I hope that this episode shook the foundation you all stand on to get more inspired in your journey. And if that is the case, here's the thing, people, share it. Share it far and wide to the depths of the earth so that we can continue our conversations of our inspired journeys and being of women of color. And don't forget to follow us on our Instagram, social media sites, Facebook. I act like I have so many. Listen, I just have Instagram and Facebook. I don't even mess around with any of the other ones. I try, but it's too much. It's too much. And then just keep listening in. Every week we drop an episode, and leave us a review. Always follow my mother's advice. If you have nothing nice to say, don't say nothing at all. So leave that review of the golden rule. And other than that, let's keep representing out there. Ladies, I love you all. Until next time. Any last words from you, Jackie, before we end?
Remember, you're worthy of more.
Boom. That's how we end this. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Thank you so much for being with me on today's journey. If you felt something resonate, if you saw yourself in this conversation, please take a moment to subscribe. Share it with a friend who needs this space, and leave a review. It helps others find us, and it's a small way you can be a part of this powerful movement. Ladies, this isn't just a podcast. It's a community, a revolution, a place where midlife women come together to embrace our hard-earned wisdom and vibrant truth. So thank you for being part of this. Remember, it's time. It's time to step into our truth. No more holding back. Midlife is ours to own, and it's only getting started. So Until next time, take a breath, honor your journey, and live with audacity, courage, and joy. This is our time, our truth, unraveled, revealed, and celebrated.